Thank you very much. But I need to concentrate on talent here. And for my holistic response, I would like to carry it over to the 4 o'clock session.
Fine.
That's fine. Okay?
Yes,
And
fine.
my short answer is talent development is the most important, indispensable element for Africa to be digitalized, to be sustainably developed. But let me ask you, all of you here, what do you mean by talent? This is my also question to myself as well. In my understanding, talent should not be a Singaporean-like meaning, what you posed. I'm not the enemy of Singaporean. I have lots of friends in Singapore, of course, but we have sometimes misunderstanding that the talent means some small, high-ranked elite who have privileged knowledge and status. But that is a wrong perception. Talent should be multi-layered. Talent should be pragmatic, and the talent should be contextualized based on the variety of necessity and the situation of 54 African countries. By saying so, very quickly, let me touch upon our JICA's approach.
Right.
The first one is a conventional one. As you righteously pointed out, we cannot neglect the importance of basic education. We talked a lot about higher education. We talk a lot about enrollment rate, which is nearly 100%, but we rarely talk what sort of capacity pupils are getting. In fact, I have to repeat that more than half of pupils are unable to make a basic arithmetic calculation. That is a fact in Africa. So we continue to invest in the children in Africa so that the African development be inclusive. This is my first point from 2 decades perspective. As for midterm perspective, we are very much enthusiastic about Africans' marvelous idea of Pan-African University concept. And we have more than a half-century's history of cooperation with Jomo Kenyatta University, which used to be the vocational training 40 years ago. But now, Jomo Kenyatta University is one of the science and technology hub of African continent in the framework of Pan-African University. And we also established the Egypt-Japan University of Science and Technology. And we're going to enlarge those sort of higher education network so that you can mobilize the elite, top-rank expertise, youngsters inside Africa and even outside Africa. For the very short-term perspective, for example, in Rwanda, we are supporting the establishment of Tumba Science and Technology College. And this is a very much hands-on and pragmatic training for youngsters to be suitable to the new market of ICT. By saying so, let me quickly touch upon some innovative and dynamic approach. This is very important. We don't have to, compartmentalize long-term, mid-term, short-term. We can do something great rapidly by utilizing ICT. You don't have to stick to African nationalities when we think of talent useful for Africa. You can imagine Silicon Valley in Africa. You can attract many talented people within a very, very limited time, as the United States did, as Singapore did, and as Japan did, as India did, yes, don't forget India. So we need to pursue this sort of, enabling environment so that we can attract people. For that purpose, let us make full use of scholarship, not in an atomized way. Scholarship overseas in a, connected way. You can make full use of scholarship students to be connected to the industries and academias and to establish a network among them. This is very, very important. we should call it, instead of a brain drain, we should call it the brain connection and brain attraction to Africa. We can achieve that. And finally, I need to say that this sort of approach, talent should not be atomized. Talent should be collective and connected for the sake of whole African continent.
Right.
Thank you.
Correcting and collecting.
Yeah.
Right. As stuck on that point, Amadou, will jump to you. We've talked about the consumption bit, but one part that we've not touched on as much, of course, he's talked about developing the skills, is the creation of this particular content. Now, at what point in the ecosystem does the private sector come in? We have to look at the end bit, what the government needs, but we still have to look at the creation bit to ensure that even when we're churning out a lot of this digital talent, it's well in line with what the government had projected maybe for 5-10 years. But how do we understand what the government wants if they themselves might not know?
Thanks for the question, George. First, you and I talked about, I don't like the term digital talent. For me, it's very broad. I like to be more specific, just because I'm in a very specific industry, which is the software industry.
Why?
So if we just stick to, let's say, information technology, IT, and we look at the numbers, 2016, I think it was $3.5 trillion, the global IT economy. Yeah? Africa only affects about 5%. Africa only affects 5% of $3.5 trillion. That tells you where we are at this stage. The funny thing is also, IT is the lowest barrier to entry in any industry, right? As a software developer, you need only two things: a laptop and your brain. That's all you need. If you're lucky, you can get the internet, you know? So with the fact that it's the lowest barrier to entry and government don't even see it that way, it kind of bothers me. Let's look at our neighbor next door, Kenya, yeah? Safaricom M-Pesa. This is a country that pioneered mobile money, right? And transformed the economy of Kenya over less than a decade, yeah? Where you were giving me the numbers, I think $65 million a month or something like that.
Right, they announced, for those who have been following, M-Pesa just announced that they had transactions in 2016 of 6.8 trillion. They announced it earlier today. 6.8 trillion Kenyan shillings, a mobile payment platform that has been localized. So that's obviously what he's referring to.
So millions of jobs are created, direct and indirect,
right,
through the agent model. You look at Facebook, value $600 billion. Millions of jobs, indirect and direct. So that now we go back and say, well, what do we fit in? How do we see the examples right here. How do we train the next generation, for me, of creators of technology, software engineers? Obviously, the educational system that we inherited from colonial powers are not going to work. They're not even fit to kind of, they don't even fit into digital world. So we have to figure out a way to provide different kinds of training, which I call practical training, which is what we do at my company, and create ecosystem rather than just silo different type of, lack of better words, entities. Create ecosystem. If you train a young person with software development skills, you can then incubate that person if they have an idea as an entrepreneur, or you can even offer them a job opportunity. And job doesn't necessarily mean you work for an office or you work in a corporate structure that's linear. You can work in a more, what you call it, a remote kind of way. Yeah, that's what they call the shared economy. If you look at how Uber was able to create millions of jobs within less than a decade, yeah? You take companies that do freelancing work. So I think that if the governments look at those numbers, that we're not doing too well in the global IT, and that this is a sure path, technology is a sure path for rapid development because it's an equalizer. The concept of time and space is reduced with technology. You remember when we used to write long letters to our mothers and send it across the ocean. Now you take on WhatsApp, you could talk to your mom within a few seconds and you get the information. I think once they start understanding that, I think that it'll work out. It'll work out, I think.
All right, now on that software bit, we'll jump to Bruce. Now we have two organizations here that are handling the deficit of engineers and scientists at tertiary level. We have AIMS and we have Carnegie Mellon. I will start with Carnegie Mellon. Bruce, what do you anticipate is not being done in the early stages of education life to churn out this talent but embed it into the curriculum that we have currently?
Well, thank you for the question. We've, Carnegie Mellon in Africa, here in Kigali, we're doing master's degrees. So these are postgraduate degrees. We're at the end of the education pipe. But we've just finished our 6th intake, and we've interviewed hundreds of students. Most recently, for this intake, we had applications from 27 African countries. And so we've done a lot of thinking about what's happening in the education system and what could help or what should change. And it turns out this isn't just an African issue, it's a global issue. A former colleague of mine, Jeanette Wing, who is now left Carnegie Mellon, is now a corporate vice president for research at Microsoft. In 2006, she wrote an article called Computational Thinking. And what she argued in that article was that in our education system, all the way from K through 12, not just at universities, we need to start introducing what she was calling computational thinking. And let me just pick up a couple aspects of that. When we talk about digital world, digital education, there's a tendency to focus on using digital devices, using programs, and maybe taking some programming courses. But what she was referring to as computational thinking is the whole scope of what goes into how we use and what's turned into our digital tools. And that includes problem solving, taking problems, being able to break them down in pieces. Another important aspect of computation and what computer science has brought to us is abstraction. In a computer course, you tend to learn algorithms for doing different things, you write programs to do them. The big problem is, how do you take those real world problems, break them down, and then abstract them into the problem that your algorithm can solve. Now these concepts, these aspects of computational thinking, these can begin to be introduced in education from the very beginning. And this is something that the whole world needs to be looking at. How do we start building in our education system the kinds of problem-solving skills and things that relate to using computers that are going to turn them into the kind of people that we need in our economy. It's interesting, let me just mention, it's interesting, a lot of these accelerator programs or these boot camp programs, they'll take students who have humanities degrees. They've never done anything computing, and they're incredibly successful. Why? Because they've probably come through an education process that's taught them computational thinking, even though they weren't doing computation. But I want to mention just one other dimension of this, and that is there's also this tendency to take digital skills and digital education and unfortunately compartmentalize it as a thing all by itself. And IT all by itself is not an end at all. What's the purpose of IT? IT is used to solve problems. ICT is used to do things. And the dimension that you need beyond just learning the mechanics and the skills and the technology is what's happening in the application. We call this the domain experts. So in education, we need to start seeing digital and computational skills permeating the education, not simply being relegated to the computer science course or the digital skills course. And this can be done. I'll tell you one of the things that we see with the students we have interviewed and admitted is quite often the only place they've used a computer was in their computer course. Now, this is kind of like saying the only place you should do reading and writing is in your literature course. We need to start thinking of the digital world as something that permeates everything. So let me just mention one other example. In my professional career, in my consulting with the automotive and aircraft industries, I've discovered the people that are writing the software are the domain experts. They're the ones that studied the application area, so they know what the problem is, and they learn how to write software to do that. And so we need to help our students understand that even if you're studying computer science, you need to get out and now learn what the domain is and understand how to make that connection. So these are all critical things that absolutely have to be done, not only in Africa, but throughout the world.
Right, and of course there was that issue that it doesn't have to happen in every country. We could have clusters in different parts of the continent. We'll get into that with Thierry, but let's come into, because you've mentioned churning out and the resources and the personnel, let's come to the issue on Gabon. Now, a while back we saw the conversation move from around 2015-2016, the government mentioned that they don't want to export anything else by 2020 apart from oil. Now, that conversation was had before, but as the time changed and innovation changed in different countries, we saw the country change their narrative, and they said, we'd like to churn maybe scientists, we'd like to churn maybe a lot of this brain exchange. Now, our president here normally says that we can't have one thing as priority, everything has to be priority. But in your sense, when we see the country indulge in such an oil conversational matter, but now we're telling you to, as you industrialize, you have to include ICT into your projections, how do you work out what is priority even as you try to industrialize?
Merci. J'indiquais plus haut qu'il y a d'abord la nécessité d'avoir un leadership. Il me semble que nous sommes ici réunis dans le cadre de Transform Africa, Smart Africa, une initiative du président Paul Kagame, du président Ali Bongo Timba pour que l'Afrique soit connectée. Donc c'est d'abord une question de leadership. Ensuite, il y a une question de capacité à atteindre la vision. La question que vous posez au sujet de l'industrialisation renvoie à la problématique que nous avions tantôt sur la question des données, qui est une question fondamentale. Je voudrais d'abord commencer par cette problématique des données. Aujourd'hui, toutes les données issues de l'économie africaine, issues des échanges, sont stockées en dehors du continent africain pour l'essentiel. Et c'est un enjeu majeur. La question de l'appropriation des données, c'est un enjeu fondamental. Lorsqu'on rappelle l'investissement important que de grands groupes ont réalisé dans ce secteur, c'est parce que c'est un secteur d'avenir. Et donc sur cette question de données, il faut donc que le continent africain s'organise. Autant nous l'avons fait dans le cadre de l'Alliance Smart Africa pour dire qu'il faut connecter l'Afrique, autant le prochain enjeu c'est de dire que faisons-nous des données issues de l'exploitation, de l'industrie, du commerce africain. Donc ça, c'est fondamental. S'agissant des TIC dans l'industrialisation, bien entendu c'est un accélérateur. Bien entendu, ça permet de réaliser une contraction de temps, un gain de productivité et une ouverture dans le monde. Et cette transformation est fondamentale, mais encore une fois, et c'est un secteur qui a été évoqué, la question de la formation des élites à partir des premières classes, mais c'est quand même une formation adaptée à nos besoins. Nous avons hérité, et je l'ai entendu, d'une structure de l'éducation coloniale, qui nous a amené aujourd'hui dans les pays africains à avoir 60 à 70% des étudiants dans des filières littéraires qui ne sont pas du tout en corrélation avec nos besoins de développement. Donc les États doivent réfléchir et mettre en place des mécanismes de formation adaptés à leurs besoins. Et même lorsqu'on parle d'application, et moi je prendrai deux exemples, lorsque le Rwanda utilise des drones pour livrer des poches de sang pour sauver des vies, c'est un usage adapté à une demande, à une réalité locale. Ailleurs, les mêmes drones, c'est pour transporter les bombes, donc pour tuer les gens. Ici, c'est pour sauver des vies. Donc nous devons de plus en plus avoir un usage adapté qui corresponde à nos besoins au niveau local. Et ensuite, maintenant, établir avec le privé de réels partenariats. L'État doit construire l'environnement institutionnel, le cadre institutionnel pour accompagner, mais il faut que le privé, le secteur privé, il est de plus en plus, et c'est heureux, il est de plus en plus intéressé à ce domaine, y compris le domaine de la formation. Et donc dans le cas du Gabon, c'est exactement ce que nous tentons de mettre en place, ce qu'on a appelé une politique de PPP pour pousser vers l'industrialisation grâce à de bons partenariats entre le secteur public et le secteur privé.
Perfect, thanks. At least this time I got the context, thanks to the translators at the back. We'll have a quick round of questions right after Thierry's response, so please just raise your hand wherever you are, and then the microphone will come exactly where you are for the question. So we have 4 questions now. Terry, you'd like to weigh in? Please, as you weigh in as well, just really into what Bruce mentioned regarding the clusters and yes.
I guess what we're trying to achieve here at the AIMS African Institute for Mathematical level is to put in place ecosystems and clusters of knowledge, which are places where you train people. And we don't need to replicate the same thing across Africa. You know, countries like Rwanda, which is hosting the Pan-African ecosystem for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, can host this. Have partner countries. Other countries like Gabon, like Togo, can specialize in other areas of data. Keep this in mind. Digitalization is not abstract. ICT is not abstract. It's all about data. And the Honorable Minister has mentioned something we don't talk about. The data of Africa is not hosted in Africa. Why? Not because other people are stealing our data, because we lack capacity. So number one thing in that cluster is that we have a multi-layer strategy of training the younger generation of African scientists. And there's no such thing as ICT skills. There's mathematical skill, period. What we need in digitalization, digital enterprises, skills like in the area of optimization, approximation, computation, as Bruce just mentioned, modeling, algorithm creation, and data analysis. Those are things we need, and those are mathematical skills, along with 2 critical skill sets, creativity and design. So that's the first level. The reason why we're emphasizing this is because traditional universities have failed the continent, have failed the young people in the way we teach the young people how to be entrepreneurial and invent anything. So we want to be able, through these clusters across Africa, because Africa is a continent, it's not a country. We want to be able to train a critical mass of scientists, data scientists, to really help Africa benefit from this digital era. The reason why we need this critical mass is because of the severe shortage of skills in the digital universe. In 3 years from now, this digital universe will create 8.4 IT-related jobs in the fields of big data.
Billion, trillion.
But only 1/3 of these 8.4 million will be filled. If you looked at the 500 million LinkedIn subscribers, only 84,000 have the title of data analyst qualification. And Africa's share of that 84,000 is less than 3%. So you put this into perspective. Again, training. What I'm a bit frustrated we haven't talked about much since this morning is the role of mathematics. We talk about ICT as though the skills of ICT are something that fall from the sky. No. We have a country, some country, the Honorable Minister mentioned this, and I will give a specific example. I don't want to name the country. A country in West Africa where about 20,000 young high school children, young students, graduate to go on to university. Only 18 went on to enroll in math department. What do you want to transform? Which digitalization are you talking about? How is that specific country going to own, control, and benefit from its data? The war of the 21st century will lies in the way country, in who owns the data, who controls it, who benefits from it, and who allows access to it, and who doesn't allow access to it. The political economy of data is all we are talking about here. Finally, truly important, research and development. You don't just have to train people. You invest in research infrastructure. We don't have the infrastructure we need for research in that area. And for those in this room who might be thinking, well, we're past 25 years old, we're 40 years old or 50 years old. There must be specific program in those ecosystems and regional knowledge clusters, program for upskilling the existing workforce. No matter how old you are, no matter how senior you are, you need to be upskilled, your knowledge to be upgraded in those skills area that I named earlier: computation, estimation, approximation, analysis, critical thinking, problem solving. Those are real things, and those are mathematical.
Absolutely perfect. We were mentioning it earlier regarding that there might be another era of colonization, but this time Africa might have the winning hand. If we have most of the data-driven and most of the data centers from here, we could actually have most of the other countries outside Africa leveraging to be part of what we are selling. Let's have the mic here, and we have. All right, so we'll just take 3 questions at a time. Please, if you could just keep your question as precise as possible. Please just say your name, where you're from, and then keep your question as precise as possible.
My name is Philippe Kabea from Kinshasa. I'm the owner of a tech lab in my country, in Congo, Kinshasa, the big Congo. So I have 2 questions. My first question is about when we are talking about data, and we say data is stored outside. The problem is we have to make a difference between data about us and data produced by us. Because Africa itself, I remember we were here in 2015 in Transform Africa. We talk about the data produced by African on internet is less than 3%. So if we don't produce data, there is no blog, there is no website, there is no data produced by African from what we are doing. So how can we have data talking about us from us? This is the first time. Because when we talk about data by about us, it's data like produced by many companies or NGOs. When we say Africa, number maybe this % producing this, Africa dying by this is data about us. And that kind of data, yes, we don't have infrastructure itself to store it. And a country like us, how come we can talk about storage of data without talking about our first issues, which is electricity? Because itself, this part of problem, where like in my country, when you talk about what we call data center, it's classified like tier 1, tier 2, and it belongs to accessibility of data. Do you guys have electricity in your country? Infrastructure itself belongs to that part first. So you have to make a difference, and I want to listen about it from you guys. And the second question is about the talent itself. The way we use talent in like in my country or everywhere in Africa where I visit, it's like when there is a big contract, it's we run to Chinese, to other countries, especially in ICT sector. But in Gabon, in Congo, in Rwanda, you have now young men able to do some things. But I don't still know why African country themselves can't use the local talent. And then as long as we're still using other talent, how come you can push them to create and to become more efficient?
Perfect, thank you. Robert Ford.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Robert Ford. I'm Chief Coordinator of Northern Corridor Technology Alliance and the Vice President for the ICT Chamber in Rwanda. I have 2 questions. One is directed towards Professor Bruce at Carnegie Mellon and the director at African Institute of Mathematical Science. My question is, why don't we have an African inter-university platform where we can develop curriculum to develop these skills for Africa? Because we are seated in this room discussing smart cities for Africa. But there's a very big dissect between institutions that deliver the skills that we need to be able to build smart cities for our continent. Unless we can collaboratively begin looking at this approach together as a continent, and we begin developing curriculums that are different from each other, we will not achieve a goal that we want to achieve as a continent. So, Professor Bruce, how far are we from getting a continental curriculum development strategy that addresses these issues at a continental level? Secondly, we were talking about, you talked about the child who's being born today is going to be occupying an office 23 years from today that he's going to be dealing with issues that we cannot imagine today. In my view, that is the whole reason why collaboration and building effort towards preparing this African citizen to be appropriate for that job 23 years to come. I like the approach of JICA, or the government of Japan. When we talk about skills and we talk about talent, there is a difference between both, in my view. Skills is preparing someone to do something. A talent is an inborn, it could be an inborn a value in someone to be able to transform and be useful in a certain way. We have lawyers in our industry who are very good ICT practitioners. We have doctors who are very good ICT practitioners. How do we develop talents and how do we develop skills? Being able to cut a difference between both is very important. JICA, for example, has understood the value of developing talent. And that's why through the government of Japan's ABE initiative, the African Business Entrepreneurship Initiative, they attract 1,000 African students every year. They take them to different universities in Japan, and what they do is not teaching them about skills. They get them to work with Japanese successful IT companies, and they have an internship program which prepares these citizens to get back and become useful in Africa. That's development of talent, and I applaud JICA for that and the government of Japan.
I think you should be here so that we ask you how come we're not seeing the same with the Northern Corridor. But that's the question for another day. Those are two questions.
I have Northern Corridor here who can answer that very well.
Those are two questions. We have a lady here. We'll just take one, and then after the answers, we can come to you. Right.
Je vous remercie. Je suis Rose Christiane Oscara Ponda, maire de Libreville, capitale du Gabon. Je remercie d'abord les panélistes qui nous ont fait partager les expériences. C'est vrai que la numérisation aujourd'hui va créer une nouvelle économie, comme l'un des panélistes l'a dit ici, et que nos villes seront intelligentes grâce à cette numérisation-là. Mais on sait également que la numérisation, ils ont encore dit que ça nécessite des infrastructures très lourdes et des financements très importants également. Mais je veux savoir comment capitaliser justement vos expériences en tant que responsable de ville. Et c'est vrai que les méthodes, les priorités ont été esquissées ici par le ministre d'État chargé de l'économie numérique au Gabon. Mais j'aimerais savoir quelles sont les limites de la numérisation et à quel moment on pourrait se dire qu'une ville est intelligente. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, je vois que ce projet de numérisation ne peut être porté que par les États. Parce que les villes que nous gérons aujourd'hui, surtout en Afrique, n'ont pas suffisamment de moyens pour porter justement ce projet-là. Et nous estimons que le partenariat entre les États et les villes est très important. Heureusement que tout à l'heure, dans quelques minutes, on aura le forum des maires sur la question. Et c'est quoi les limites de cette numérisation? Et à quel moment, comme je disais tantôt, une ville peut être considérée intelligente? Je vous remercie.
Perfect. We'll start off with the first question that was on data about us and data produced by us, and data versus pertinent issues such as electricity. We'll start with you, Honorable Minister, for those two particular questions.
Bien. Il est évident que la problématique de l'industrialisation de l'Afrique passe par la résolution de la question de l'électricité, l'énergie. Il faut plusieurs mécanismes, il faut des ressources, mais là aussi il faut se tenir à un certain nombre de projets qui ont été engagés, mais encore une fois il faut du leadership, une volonté politique. Il y a de très longues années, on a parlé de plusieurs projets sur le continent pour faciliter l'accès à l'électricité. 40 ans après, on continue à parler du projet de Inga, par exemple. On continue à parler d'autres projets. Il faut donc pouvoir passer. Mais là, il faut mutualiser les efforts. C'est un fait. Mais indépendamment du manque d'énergie, l'Afrique produit les données. Et les données dont nous parlons ne sont pas que des données qui circulent sur les réseaux, sur Internet. Nous allons vers des données. Le e-éducation, le e-visa, le e-santé, nous allons produire des données. Mais ces données que nous produisons aujourd'hui, que nous avons commencé à produire, malheureusement, nous n'avons pas, comme ça a été dit, les infrastructures nécessaires pour avoir sur le continent des lieux de stockage de ces données. L'industrie pétrolière produit des données, l'industrie minière produit des données, l'industrie forestière produit des données, l'environnement, le climat, ce sont des données. Mais aujourd'hui, celui qui accède à nos données, qui les stocke, que vous le vouliez ou pas, il analyse la structure de nos économies, il analyse nos potentiels et il peut donc anticiper sur ce que nous-mêmes nous n'avons pas la possibilité d'anticiper. Donc, c'est un impératif, la question du stockage des données, qui est à mutualiser. On a Djibouti aujourd'hui qui est bien situé sur le continent, qui a 3 câbles sous-marins qui l'irriguent, on a Libreville, on a Kigali, il faut pouvoir mutualiser et se dire, nous allons stocker nos données au niveau de tel pays, au niveau de telle région, parce que c'est indispensable, c'est essentiel. Si nous ne le faisons pas, nous allons devoir demain courir auprès de ceux qui ont stocké nos données pour aller les racheter, pour les analyser. C'est fondamental. Donc, c'est un enjeu. Il y a la question de l'électricité, il faut régler, mais entre-temps, nous avons quand même des villes qui ont de l'énergie, qui commencent à résoudre des problèmes. Il faut déjà régler cette problématique. Sinon, dans 5 ans, on sera en but à de réelles difficultés.
I hope that answers your question and parts of your question on ensuring a digital situation even when we're mapping out smart cities. I'll come to, you had a question, Wayne on the same? Right. And then Amadou, I'll come to you right next.
Let me share with you cautious optimism and JICA's mistake since 20 years ago regarding a capacity development of talents. We did a serious error in that sector. That is our too much prioritization of curriculum, too much prioritization of university, too much prioritization on teachers and professors. Yes, in this era, we need directly go to youngsters, go to kids. Thanks to ICT, we can do this. And thanks to ICT, we can make a great rapid difference in a very short time by igniting children's talent and youngsters' talent. So I say I'm cautiously optimistic about the African future. Talent is globally fungible and globally available. So if we make full use of teaching materials, learning materials, should I say, for African people. And we have already started. For example, in Rwanda, we have a very small entrepreneur, Japanese small company who are interested in developing this sort of ICT utilized materials. So let us make full use of ICT for the sake of ICT. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tola. Amadou, there was a very pertinent question about the contracts given to China and other players coming into our market and outsourcing talent. We'd like you to handle that.
Yeah, so first of all, I do agree there's a difference between talent and skills. Skills you can actually learn through whatever industry you're in, yeah? But talent is more of whatever skills you have which sharpen you to be better at what you do. That's what we do at Gabea, the company that we've started. We realize a lot of the, for example, college students graduate with computer science degree with masters, may know how to understand the computer science world, but they're not very specialized in what they do. For example, nobody now just hire a computer scientist. They may want to focus on hiring what we call a DevOps, which is more on the data center side, or they want to hire a mobile application engineer. So it's become more specific because jobs are now becoming more specific. Now, if we tied it into your to what you're asking me, yeah, we're still importing foreigners in Africa to do the stuff that young people can do here. The question is now, it's a chicken or the egg thing for me, because how fast do you train to your talent to be global enough to compete? And how fast do you provide them jobs? So it's like, which one comes first? You can't waste the next 10 years of shaping up the next talent to compete while the others are also, for Africa right now, we live in a very dangerous state. If we don't fix the talent problem, if we don't have enough engineers that are in Africa that can do what Indians can do, Asians can do, Americans can do, might as well give up.
I saw the Honorable Minister want to weigh in on the issue on, because obviously you've had that conversation on outsourcing of talent.
Mais d'abord, et ça vient d'être dit, la science n'a pas de nationalité. Nous parlons de numérique, c'est universel. La science n'a aucune nationalité. Mais dans le même temps, à quoi les États sont aujourd'hui confrontés? À une jeunesse qui est à la recherche d'un emploi, à des villes qui accueillent aujourd'hui entre 70-75% de la population, à une pression urbaine très forte. Il faut donc résoudre cette question du chômage des jeunes. Et donc nous ne pourrons pas continuer pour longtemps à donner des marchés à ceux qui viennent de l'extérieur, d'autant plus qu'il faut aller vers la formation des élites locales. Et donc de plus en plus, les gouvernements africains font confiance aux talents africains, mais de plus en plus. Malheureusement, nous sommes une économie mondialisée. Nous ne dirons pas à quelqu'un de ne pas compétir parce que nous serons en but à nos propres règles. Il faut donc être capable, nous-mêmes en tant que talents africains, d'être compétitifs et donc de pouvoir avoir des offres qui vont concurrencer l'offre venue de l'extérieur. Il n'y a que cela. Nous ne ferons pas du tout de marché au rabais parce qu'il faut donner du travail aux Africains, bien au contraire. Si nous le faisions, nous ne travaillerions pas pour nos États.
All right, we'll have just 1 minute each. Ladies first.
I just wanted to pick up on the unemployment. We have to solve it. 10 million young people enter the workforce annually. And so why we feel at DOT it's very important to build the entrepreneurial mindset, to build a social innovators mindset, because young people, and we've worked with hundreds of thousands on the continent, want to solve the problems they're living with every day. They want to create themselves, and they see digital as an opportunity to leverage the enterprises they're creating. So I've felt the conversation that it's been going on to this sort of, talent at one level and not really focusing on inclusive digital talent development or inclusive digital skills development. And that is where young people on this continent have already demonstrated helping their peers, building digital literacy skills in their peers, in young women, in their own communities, creating livelihoods for themselves, unleashing their talent. I agree with you 100%, and putting, the solutions in their own hands. And this is the opportunity now with the digital enabling tools that are out there. So it's focusing on the people, their knowledge and their attitude shift to drive their own development. And that is what the new system will be created, and that is the opportunity in a digitally disruptive environment. And it is the skills that Bruce was talking about and that I was talking about as well. So move to being able to have people, drive their own innovations and abilities to, chart their own path in life and leverage digital and bring the training to where young people are at.
Perfect.
To the question of collaboration and curriculum and the mayor's question, I don't want us to overlook this, but very briefly I wanted to add to what the panelists have already said on data and the local versus foreign companies. While all the things that we've said before here is true, it's only partially true. When you take the example of international development aid, what has Africa faced? Got funding. If it's from, I'm not a politician, so allow me to be direct. I won't be diplomatic. If you got funding from AFD in France for a project in Togo or Benin, all the assets you had to purchase have to come from France, even if you do a public RFP. So there's still this worry that some of our young people are qualified.
He does not agree.
Qualified. I lived in that world, so I know what I'm talking about. So It's changing though, it's changing, but this is still happening in high-end science stage. But we do not want to, bring the quality and excellence down. But this is still something, and government has to make this happen. I remember that had it not been for President Obasanjo's particular policies, Africa would not have the Dangotes and Toli Olimolu today. I want to expand on that. So this is what our country, this is how Asia got developed, period. So what I'm going to say about the curriculum, collaboration around the curriculum is important. Unfortunately, universities are part of the two institutions, the world's oldest institutions are religion and universities. The lethargic. Higher education institutions, they don't want to change. And they have to have private actors like us to start rethinking the way they teach. It's going to take some time. It won't happen by miracle. Madame le maire, pour votre question, quelles sont les limites du numérique? Les limites, c'est que votre ville, par exemple Libreville, va générer des données à tel point que la tête, l'intelligence d'un être humain ne peut pas les analyser tout de suite. Or, c'est ce qu'il nous faut faire pour vous permettre de prendre les décisions qui s'imposent. Il faut donc former les gens capables d'analyser ces données qui tombent massivement par milliards. C'est les limites. Parce que les outils technologiques ne vont pas vous faire cette analyse. Il faut toujours des humains pour faire cette analyse.
All right, thank you. Bruce, would you like to please weigh in on why exactly we don't have an intercontinental curriculum?
Yes, I do want to make a comment on this. I'm going to say some positive things about Carnegie Mellon University in Africa. And let me just say, we didn't come here, it wasn't us. Rwanda invited us. And in the 5.5 years I've been here, I've become convinced it was an amazing thing that they did. And let me just mention a couple things. When students go to graduate school abroad, when Africans pack their bags and decide to go study someplace else, wonderful experience. I'm sure they won't learn all kinds of good things, but they are disconnected from two things. They're completely disconnected from the professional network that could be their network for the rest of their career. Our students, they study in Africa, they are building the professional network in graduate school that they will have for their career. We will be graduating our 100th graduate in June, and every single one of our students want to have a career in Africa. And we've been told by students that go abroad, well, it was a nice experience, but you know what? I just got completely disconnected. I wasn't building any network. The other thing is that in our curriculum, the students work with companies. They do internships, they do practicums, they do projects. And they're connecting to the network that will become the fiber of their career in terms of jobs and context. So this concept of developing a curriculum in Africa, I am 100% behind this, because the other dimension of this is all this imported curriculum. I'm sorry, it was developed for a different context, and the things that are going on in Africa are the exciting things, and it would be great. I agree with Jerry. The universities in the United States too. It's very interesting. They're known. Everybody at university is liberal until you start talking about the university, and then they're suddenly conservatives. Don't change our curriculum. But this absolutely has to happen. The education has to be sourced from Africa, because what's happening in Africa is absolutely completely different than what's happening in the developed world. So I'm all for this. I'd love to talk some more about this and talk with people about how we can make this happen.
It's quite unfortunate that most of the conversation that we have here, after we've had it, we go back to our individual countries, and then we wait for the next Transform Africa, and we come and we have a call to action. So hopefully those issues will be raised with most of the leaders tomorrow. Pertinent issues that have a call to action, not just conversational, because we've had enough of that in Africa. We've had so much conversation. So let's just have two questions. I'm being told to wrap up. We'll have two questions from the back. There were two gentlemen. There was a right. We have one there, and he had actually asked before.
Thank you.
Please make your question as brief as possible.
Okay, we'll try. My name is Magdar Sek. I'm from United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. I'm working on ICT and innovation. I follow this very interesting discussion, and I would like to thank Mr. Cherry. But the issue of big data is very important, and you summarize very well the challenge for Africa. Now I will not go for comment. Let me ask one question to the Honorable Minister of Gabon. I'm going to shift in French. Monsieur l'Honorable Ministre, j'ai bien écouté votre intervention, mais il y a une question peut-être que j'aimerais bien que vous appesantiez un peu sur la question de l'innovation. Parce que tout ce qu'on a parlé ici, tant qu'il n'y a pas une politique pour promouvoir l'innovation au niveau des jeunes, pour créer des talents, pour leur donner la possibilité de créer de nouveaux produits qui vont être émergés dans les marchés, ça n'aboutirait pas à grand-chose. Il y a des pays qui l'ont bien compris, le Rwanda a bien compris cela, c'est pourquoi dans le Niki 4, ils ont mis en avant l'innovation et le développement du secteur privé. Il y a au niveau du Sénégal aussi la stratégie, et je pense que le Mali est en train de travailler sur des stratégies pour promouvoir l'innovation. Je pense que c'est la question importante. L'Afrique a des talents, il y a des jeunes talents. Partout, vous allez dans plusieurs pays, il y a des incubateurs. Mais le problème qui se pose à ces jeunes, c'est l'accès au financement pour vendre leurs produits, parce que le système bancaire n'est pas adapté à ces jeunes talents. Donc c'est pourquoi vous avez des idées. Il y a des gens, les Facebook, les WhatsApp, tout ça, ça existe en Afrique. Il y a des jeunes qui l'ont fait. Moi, j'ai visité des incubateurs, il y a des jeunes qui ont ces idées. Mais le problème, après un an, c'est fini parce qu'ils n'ont pas les moyens. Je vous remercie et je pense qu'on pourra discuter davantage sur d'autres questions. Merci.
Thank you for keeping it brief. One last question there. At the back.
Hi, I'm Alpha, co-founder of BND System. We provide cloud-based management system in my country, in Guinea, West Africa. I have the same question of the man here and my friend from Kinshasa. This is the same question that is asked since we begin here. When we came in Kigali, we see good moods, open-minded people that want to go forward. But as in my country, people come here, attend to these meetings, and they go back and they do nothing to keep moving. I see a little hypocrisy in that. And I wonder how we, the private sector, can we help our people to have innovative application that can help them if the government don't look our way. What can we do? Do we give up? Do we keep doing business? Do we immigrate in Kigali because it is easy here? I wonder how can we go forward? Thanks.
A short answer to that one about immigrating to Kigali. From my perspective, the answer is yes. Yeah, I will tell you that for free. But let's have that. We had the two. So, Honourable Minister, you asked one. So please, if you answer, when you answer that, just give your final remarks because we have just 5 minutes to wrap it up.
Merci. Je pense que les deux questions sont liées. L'initiative prise par les chefs de l'État pour mettre ensemble l'Alliance Smart Africa doit effectivement sortir de la vision du projet pour devenir une réalité dans la vie des populations et notamment des entreprises qui sont dans les nouvelles technologies et dans l'innovation. Il me semble que c'est fondamental qu'effectivement nous ne donnions pas le sentiment d'une rupture entre ce qui est proclamé et ce qui est vécu par les populations. Ce serait un risque trop grand pour les États. Il faut en effet que les gouvernements passent de la parole aux actes pour que les jeunes continuent à y croire et continuent à rester dans le pays pour créer des entreprises, créer des emplois, etc. C'est fondamental. Nous tentons de résoudre ces problématiques de manière effectivement à accompagner les incubateurs, à régler la question des financements qui est une question essentielle. Comment est-ce que lorsque j'ai créé mon entité, ma petite entreprise, comment j'obtiens le financement? Maintenant, vous avez posé la question de l'innovation. En effet, l'innovation par l'observation. Nous disions tantôt qu'il faut arriver effectivement à résoudre les problématiques auxquelles l'Afrique est confrontée. On a parlé de l'exemple venu du Kenya sur la question du transfert d'argent, mais c'était une problématique simple à laquelle le Kenya a été confronté et qui a permis de résoudre un problème. Et aujourd'hui, mais c'est un exemple de par le monde, on a désormais des opérateurs, de gros opérateurs français, le téléphone mobile qui ouvrent les banques en ligne sur la base de ce qui s'est fait au Kenya. Donc c'est en réfléchissant à nos problématiques qu'on parvient effectivement à trouver des solutions. Mais il faut investir massivement dans l'innovation. Il y a 40 ans, des chefs d'État africains ont créé l'Institut africain d'informatique au Gabon, qui correspondait à un temps donné. Ce temps est dépassé. Il faut maintenant résoudre les vrais problèmes. Là, on parle de données, on parle de transfert, on parle de communication électronique, de transfert de données électroniques, mais quid de la cybersécurité? Il faut de la recherche dans ce domaine pour sécuriser toutes nos transactions. Et donc, il faut effectivement qu'il y ait de plus en plus, et si nous pouvons, dans le cas de l'Alliance Smart Africa, et je terminerai par là, parvenir à un accord, à un consensus, imposer que les gouvernements africains investissent X% de leur budget dans le secteur de l'innovation et des nouvelles technologies, serait formidable. Nous nous battons pour cela, mais il faut reconnaître que dans nos gouvernements aujourd'hui, les TIC commencent à peine à avoir de la place. Ça se limitait à la téléphonie mobile dans un premier temps. Aujourd'hui, nous insistons, on est sur la question des données. Et c'est fondamental. C'est dans les données qu'il y a de la ressource, qu'il y a de l'argent à se faire. Ce n'est plus simplement sur Allo. Voice is noise. Voilà. Merci.
Absolument parfait. Right, Thierry, your final remarks. We'll leave the question that was asked to Gbe on the private sector that was asked there. But to just give you final remarks, we have 30 seconds this time, not 1 minute.
Just to say to the gentleman from Congo that I hear you, effective leadership and vision is crucially important for Africa. And I'll give you a concrete example, and I'm done. A couple of years ago, a delegation of AIMS, we met with the leadership in this country, including President Kagame. A few months later, 90 days, we almost all moved to this country. The headquarters of AIMS is here. We set up the Secretariat of the Global Next Einstein Forum here. We have an AIMS Institute for Mathematical Sciences established here. We're going to put in place the very first Center of Excellence, Center for Quantum Research and Technology in Rwanda, because of effective leadership. I can tell you, I've traveled across 48 countries in Africa. I've been to some countries. I've been going there for 5-6 years. I haven't been able to move 1 inch. But here, we were able to achieve all these things. It shows that leadership drives everything. Because you can have a country full of Einsteins. If you don't have effective leadership, it will be a waste of talent and resources.
Perfect. Thank you. Janet?
Rwanda, I have to echo, truly stands out with its leadership. My closing is to invest in the talent of youth as the early adopters of technology. Here in Rwanda, we are mobilizing thousands of young digital ambassadors who will actually be training 5 million citizens in Rwanda in digital literacy skills. This is in their home communities and in their villages. This is an asset that we cannot ignore. And this can be replicated, and it is being replicated in other countries in Africa. Youth are the early adopters. They will be creating a new system, a digitally disrupted system that will work for them because the jobs are not there. We need to have faith in their capacity to lead and increase our investment in young women and young men as digital champions and as the social innovators they are, who are solving problems by being social innovators and leveraging technology.
Thank you. Dr. Toda.
Just 10 minutes before I came here, I made a Facebook friend with Mr. Rindana from FabLab.
Right.
And it was amazing to see he invented digital rewriting machine almost from scratch. Yes, it was amazing. Even a Japanese master course degree student cannot do that. And the role of government and the role of development agencies is not financing them, is just giving them opportunity and giving the financing angel to be attracted to the Africa. That is a role of government and the role of so-called development agencies such as JICA. 하자자하 아프리카 니 해자 그베라 이체레 체조 주니 응대체 니코라나바한가 니사카 자부메니. Do you understand? Wakati ujiao wa Afrika ni mzuri. Kufuatia mwelekeo wenu pamoja na ICT. Africa's future is bright. When we depend on...
Right, the future is Kenya, Rwanda, not even Thailand, right?
Sorry, finish.
Please, your last remarks and the issue on the private sector.
Okay. All right, so somebody asked me once, what makes you get up in the morning? What makes you do what you do? So I told the person, I have the fear of the recolonization of Africa through IT. Because that is one area where we can compete. Like I said, it reduces time and space, and you don't need that much resource to compete. I urge every government in Africa to make it the #1 priority to focus on IT. That's the sure way where we can compete, and hopefully in the next, change the digital revolution of Africa.
Perfect. Very precise. Bruce, your final words.
I visited a friend in Nigeria, and she told me that she brought home some books that were written by Nigerians, some children's stories, and read them to her child, and her child said, I just love that story. And she said, why? She said, because their names sound like my names. Going back to this issue of African curriculum, African students need role models. They need to understand that Africans can do things, and they're doing these things. So independent of what the content of the curriculum is, getting in front of our students what Africans are doing is going to be just like how do you get women into engineering? You get women role models. I'd like to see that happen. And let me just end by saying capacity building for a dead end where there's no jobs is pretty discouraging. And somebody brought up this issue of why are there not Africans doing some of these jobs. During the time here I've thought about that. The big money goes to people that roll in to do projects. Well, if I've got a project, it has to be done in a year, I'm not going to hire entry-level people. I can't. So I'd like to see African governments think very hard about how do they start making companies invest not in just doing projects, but in the long haul, establishing long-term indigenous operations where now they can start really employing these bright students that are coming out of school. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Now, as we wind up, we've been here 1 hour. Let's just do by a show of hand. Do we think that Africa is actually ready to take on this conversation on digital talent in a globalized economy, or we've just been speaking and it will end up like other conversations? How many think we are ready to take on this conversation on digital talent? Pretty convincing, almost the entire room. That means there's still some work to do. But many thanks to our panelists, of course, Honorable Minister Thierry, Janet, Dr. Toda, Amadou, and Bruce, for creating time to come and speak to us, and the viewers who have been watching on RBA and, of course, CNBC Africa, first in business worldwide. Thank you for giving us your time. We have a lot more sessions happening, and I know we've not had lunch, so allow me to let you go. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Murakaza neza mu Rwanda.
Bienvenue au Rwanda.
Welcome to Rwanda.
Mnakaribishwa nchini Rwanda.
Transform Africa Summit is here again. Rwanda will be hosting heads of state and government, first ladies and government officials.
The Plus de 300 maires de villes africaines et des délégués représentant le monde des affaires et le corps académique seront là pour vous apporter de nouvelles approches pour transformer nos villes africaines en villes intelligentes. Nos équipes seront ici pour décrypter chaque instant de ce rendez-vous continental.
Sessions will feature the unveiling of the African Smart Cities Blueprint. What does the blueprint entail? What does it mean to you? From exclusives to panel discussions, RBA has you covered.
tuzabagezaho ibiganiro biteganyijwe imbonankubone ndetse n'ibiganiro byimbitse bifashisha abasesenguzi batandukanye ingingo ku yindi.
We will also be right here in studio to bring you wall-to-wall updates, analysis, interviews on this very important event in the ICT's calendar right here on Rwanda Television.
Kauli mbiu ya mkutano wa kimataifa wa Transform Africa ambao mwaka huu 2017 ambao unafanyikia nchini Rwanda ni kudumisha majadiliano ambayo yanahusu maendeleo ya teknolojia katika bara la Afrika.
See you in Kigali from May 10th to May 12th, 2017. Brought to you by the Smart Africa Alliance.